Okay, great. Awesome. So now you understand why I ask you to sit next to each other and stuff like that. Okay, so now I want you to yell the movie you've heard. If you didn't hear a movie, just yell something, okay? And, but in the same time, right? So 1, 2, 3. I heard Frozen. I don't know what's up with you guys. Okay, cool. So now that we are, no, let's do one last thing before we start. So I would try, you guys that were yesterday, you know this stuff already. So I want to like warm up, because it's a long session and it's mainly for you guys. I want you to, when I lower my hand, like in the lowest point, I want you to clap very politely, like in a poetry night, okay? Like, you know, like maybe you can use these, it's okay. But when I go up here, I want you to go like psycho 12-year-old sing Justin Bieber for the first time, okay? Like yell and clap and throw brows on me, I don't care. Okay, so ready? Let's start from really, really polite, yeah, really, yeah, you all see? Yeah, very, okay, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Now we can start our session finally. Okay, so we're talking about 18 tips for the Angular architect, or Angular OCD, maintain sanity in large-scale projects, or even how to work in a team and not get stabbed, okay, by me and Hi-Rez.io. Okay, first of all, who am I? I'm Shai Reznik. I have over 10 years of experience in front-end development, and I run the largest JavaScript meetup group in Israel. Okay, it's over like 2,000 people and stuff like that. I co-organized the first ngConf Angular conference in Israel, and now we're working on the second one, which was a big event. And I run a Google developer group in one of the cities in Israel. I also am a consultant, which is awesome, okay? And I work with over 20 enterprise and startup companies for the past few years, doing mainly large-scale applications, okay? Working on big products. Helping most of them transition from legacy technology or older technology to Angular, okay? And I found Angular after trying like really hard, moving from framework to framework until I got to Angular. It's not like my first choice was. And I also helped them building their like build script and generating their projects and helping with all of the aspects of client-side development. This is an illustration of me consulting, okay? Usually if you will hire me, this is how it will look like, okay? And my main hobby in life is also doing improv, which is a mix of stand-up comedy and stage play acting, but everything is improvised without written scripts and stuff like that. So it's like, whose line is it anyway, if you're familiar? Cool. Recently, I started Hi-Rez.io, which is an online training school, but for people with a short attention span, okay? So it's really crazy, short videos, but you learn front-end development and architecture and all the concepts you need for your client-side development. But yeah, crazy. A few weeks ago, I had the great pleasure of speaking at ngConf, the largest Angular conference in the world, doing a really crazy talk, okay? Roasting all the bad features in Angular in front of the Angular team. Okay, so it's like, okay, you should Google ngWet or go to Hi-Rez.io, you will see it in the front page, and check this. Even if you're not an Angular developer, you will like this talk. My grandma liked this talk, but you know, maybe, yeah, she's not objective. Okay, background on this talk. What my motivation was to create this talk. So, clean code. Who heard about Clean Code, the book? Awesome. By the way, how many of you are JavaScript developers? Okay. So all the rest, you can go. No. And who has experience with Angular? Oh, cool. But you're not like JavaScript developers, but you have experience with Angular. So I should have said like developers, right? Or something like that. Okay, you have experience with Angular. So this talk is mainly for people who have a little bit of experience with Angular, know the concept. It's not an introduction. It's more advanced than that. But if you have any questions, raise your hand. It's OK. We have like, 5 hours to be here, right? So it's a really long time. So ask questions and feel free. So Clean Code, OK? It's a really good book for those of you who don't know it, written by Robert C. Martin, or by his nickname, Uncle Bob. And he talks about principles he learned over 40 years of development or something that help you make your development process much more sane, okay? Like how to keep your code clean, how to write your code with clear intentions, how to name your function, how to, like, he has all these rules and principles, like the single responsibility principle and other principle like that. So I really recommend you guys, no matter what language you are working with, the code examples are in Java, and I'm not a Java developer, but it's still a really, really good book to read. So a few years ago, I read this book, and I've been rereading it like a manual every couple of months, and started applying it to my own development. And so a few years ago, I began consulting to large companies with the large teams, and work with lots of them. And the majority, I saw that they're experiencing chaos. Whoever had experienced chaos in their development process? Okay, everyone. Cool. So you know the pain I felt and they felt. And so applying the principles of clean code and other best practices from the Angular community or the development community, I started like cleaning up their processes and their code and helping them reduce the chaos level, okay, in their startups or large teams and such. Because mostly why you have this chaos, because sometimes because some marketing or sales guy decided that you should move to Angular, and you have 3 days because he promised that all the feature will be ready, right? So you have 3 days to learn everything and put everything in one file and make it work, like a POC or something like that, right? And then what's have been done takes like months and months to repair, right? So this is like the main reason behind it. And I'm really into systematical architecture solution. I have OCD. I need everything like very in orderly fashion and like every name like good and stuff like that. I'm not perfect like all of us, but I'm trying. I'm aspiring to be that way. So I was really happy to fix all the problems and stuff like that. Not all the problem, I will tell you about later, but yeah. So expectations of this, from this talk. So this talk is less about code, less about syntax, how you write controller and stuff like that. It's more about code structure and tools you need to use and the best practices. When you will learn the syntax, you should leave this session with the maybe better way to do it, okay? And the tips are short, and just to give a taste, right, of I won't dive into the actual concepts and stuff, just to give you something to think about, to Google it after it, or ask me after it. I wrote the title of the talk, like 18 tips, before I thought about 18 tips. So you might find some of the tips like not Angular tips. Okay, you will. And please remember that this is not a dogma, Okay, this is suggestion, so don't take it like, okay, no, there's another way. I'm sure there are better ways to do everything, okay, but these are suggestions based on experience. You might find a better way, and please tell me, and then I will switch to that way, if it's good. Okay. So before we start, it's totally real research from '92. People who applied these tips got fame and certification as a ninja, and beautiful women or men, depending on your preferences. Yeah, so do apply these tips once this talk is over. Okay, tip number 1. Follow naming conventions. Okay, so file system naming. In JavaScript, most common way, when I researched, I moved from Flex development, if you know Flash and Flex development, to JavaScript a few years back, before Flex has finally, it's not dead yet, but it was beginning to die. And I researched a lot of open source projects and the naming conventions, and I found out that you should use lowercase, okay? In most of the projects I saw, they use lowercase, and you divide your words instead of camel case with dashes. And it applies also to files and folder, okay? So this is mainly, if you will see the projects I'm working on, you will see that I follow this naming convention through. And no matter if maybe you guys prefer to do camel case, which is fine. But make sure that you follow through, okay, and not do the folders in lowercase and dashes and the file name in uppercase or in camel case, because it makes it more confusing. And new developers that are joining your team can see the folder and they name the file, and you get the point, okay? So this is tip number 1. Tip number 2. Okay, suffix your files correctly, okay? So as you can see, this is how files look in or in our project that I'm working on. So I suffix my file according to the components they contain. So if I have a controller, I have a CTRL or template or directive or services and stuff like that, all the components of Angular, okay? Why? Because it makes it easier to read at first sight. If I'm going through the file system, trying to figure out if somebody already created some feature, like user settings or something like that, I can go into the folder and see if you already created the controller and not guess if I'm looking at the controller or a service or whatever, right? So I suffix my files. And in some cases, it's essential for automation or filtering files and stuff like that. Usually, you have automation. We'll talk about later, but you can filter stuff by I want to include every source file, but not the test. Okay, so I can filter by the .test, okay, and exclude all of these files, okay? And it shortened the names and decision time. So shorten the names is okay, you have 2 options to do it, the full length of the word, like controller or service, and the abbreviation like I did, like CTRL and stuff like that. I like it better. It's a shorter name, and you get it, okay? But you can, so the Angular style guide have the full name. So you can decide by your preferences. And decision time, you don't have to think every time if, wait, it's a user service, or should I add the service to the file name or not? So you have this decision time that you're investing every time you create a new file, some stuff like that. This way, you just let it go and just add the SRV whenever you need it, wherever you create it. Tip number 3. Owned. There can be only one component per file, okay? So this is a very important tip. So as you can see, I have a users controller, and I have here the controller definition. But here I deleted another needy controller definition that wanted to get in my controller file, but I left it out. OK, so why? Before I will give an example, okay, in the start, or like in the beginning of Angular examples and stuff like that, they used to show like controllers.js or I don't know, services.js, and you have like and companies that I like helped them, they were like having like I don't know 3,000 lines of code of controller.js, okay, and usually they called me when something is wrong. And I then came to their shop or their company and looked at like 3,000 lines of, of controllers, or sometimes 5,000 lines of controller, and I thought to myself, maybe I shouldn't have taken this phone call. You know, it's like very frustrating. So, so this way it makes it easier to locate components. I know that I will find the user controller in the user's control. Okay, file, and not like hidden inside it another needy controller or stuff like that. It keeps your files shorter, as I said, the 5,000 lines of code, you separate it. And it's less conflicts when you're working in a team on the same on the same files. When you have a giant, a biggest file, right, with all the controllers, you have much more conflicts and like to resolve in your version control. And it's easier to move file from folder to folder when we refactor stuff. You don't have to think, wait, I have two controllers here, so should it be on this feature or this feature and stuff like that. Awesome. Tip number 4. Keep everyone together. I don't know what this guy, OK. So also in the more naive examples of Angular structure, folder structure, they have like views or controller and stuff like that. But when your app gets larger and larger and larger, it's better to keep it feature-based or component-based or whatever you want to call it based, state or whatever, section, but keep everything together. So you have the controller and its unit test, okay? And it's really, really easy in tools like Karma and stuff like that to separate the stuff, to filter out by if you add the suffix, the correct suffix. And you have the template, and you have like even the style. I will talk about later, but even the style, everything in one place. Think how easier is it to locate stuff and change stuff very quickly and not look at the giant views folder with like thousands of views to locate your stuff. Although you have like a shortcut in your IDE by the name, but you know, prevent a lot of stuff. So it's easier to find related files. It prevents file duplication. So if someone renamed or add, I don't know, a prefix to the file, and it's the same like component that solves the same thing, right? So it's easier to see because it's in one place. It prevents folder structure duplication. So in Maven, I think you have like test and main, and you need to keep all the unit tests and all the folders, duplicate folder structure or something like that. And maybe in other projects, okay, the unit tests are separated, and you keep like, and it's makes it harder to refactor stuff, okay? So this prevents it. Tip number 5. Break into sections, okay? So think in sections. This is like a design tip, okay, when you think of your applications. And it's more of a glimpse to the future. In the future, where JavaScript is heading to, we will use web components, okay? And it's a good time now to, when you design your application, to look at it like a bunch of components, okay? But components can be divided to two types: sections and reusable components, okay? Or just components. So here we'll talk about section. Next we'll talk about components. so sections. What are sections? Sections are describing the layout of your, like what you see in your pages, okay? So you have, if you have main pages of your website, application, web app, and stuff like that, like you have like the dashboard and the user settings, for example, okay? So you have user settings and a dashboard, okay, and each are top-level section, okay? And each one have subsections. So maybe the user settings will have a menu and a form and whatever, okay? But each should be a subsection, and that way it goes down. And I'm not talking about reusable components here because they are context-based. We'll talk about it. So these are section components. Currently in Angular, we use directives, right? In Angular 2.0, in the future, we use web components. But today, we're using directive because they had to invent something, okay, to give us this ability now. Okay, so we use directive. So first, before we continue, what do I mean by that? Okay, in Angular, if you learn in Angular now, you will see a directive called ng controller, right? Who knows about ng controller here? Cool. Stop using it, okay? Right? It's like in the future, it will be gone, okay? So the other way, it's a little bit more like few lines of code to write, okay? But to prepare yourself better for the future, should use directives, okay? And create a directive. You have like a specific way to do it, but you create a directive that like you plant in your template, like this, user settings, instead of like a div, ng controller, and ng template, ng include, and stuff like that. That better represent your intention. What is this like part, okay? And it hides, encapsulates all the like routing behind it, like which controller and which template and stuff like that, okay? It's a little bit more to code, but it's a better preparation for the future. So this is why I wrote here, use directives and not the Angular directive ng controller, but custom directive, okay? For your own benefit. Section are aware of context, okay? So they know which page they are in. Maybe they don't know like the parent, and the parent knows them, but they are aware they can inject services that are context-wise and stuff like that, okay? Where reusable components or reusable directives should not know about your app-level services, okay? So this is the distinction. These directives must know, okay, in order to make your development time shorter. So if you're using custom directive, make sure you learn about bind to controller and controller as, so you will get the same experience as currently when you're using ng controller, okay? So if you use these parameters and even add isolated scope, you will get the same experience. So you will just work with the controller and not the link function of the directive and trying to mess with your head and stuff like that, okay? Just use the controller. Let's check it out. And the new Angular router. So a few weeks ago in ngconf, they announced that the new Angular router that they're working on that should be released in the next 1.x release should support both 1.x and 2.x. And in the former version of this talk, I recommended using UI Router, which is a community project, open source project that supports sub-states or subsections, like sub-routing, okay? And the new Angular router will also support it and will be like the official router of Angular. So you should check it out now. It's like pretty new, okay? So so that's why I'm not diving into it now. But you should like keep it in your head. Tip number 6 for the structure. Okay, so this is the way that I structure. I found best to structure my applications. And usually, I start with the app name, okay? And I will show you, you will see why. And app name contains the app module, the main module, and then I have the sections, okay, subsections, and a common directory with the data access layer or the reusable components and stuff like that. This makes it much easier for me with projects of large applications to scale it, okay, and not keep everything in, like we saw before, in one folder, one controller folders and stuff like that. Okay, it's much more scalable. So the app name, okay, what's go under, excluding the common, is all the app sections. The common is what get repeated through the sections. So if we have a my custom select box that gets repeated in every section, this should be in the common. Okay. Also data services that are common to, okay, different sections. Okay. Before I'll start, I'll stop for questions. Nested sections, nested folder. So this is my preferences. You can argue about it, okay, if you want to flatten it all and not keep refactoring when you refactor like your design. But from my experience, it makes it much easier to understand what's going on in your application when you look at the file system and understand, okay, or look at the template or the actual browser and figure out, okay, this is the menu, this is the menu of the dashboard, okay, and this is the menu of the user setting because they are nested separately and not okay, so you can prefix or subdirectory it, okay, you have the choice. Okay, before, any questions? Up until now? No? Okay, let's continue. So, yeah, I will name her Sarah. It's taken. So you can have Sarah 4343 or Sarah _ Yeah. It's for the video, so it will look like, okay. So namespacing components, okay? So usually when defining components, as you saw, the folder structure is beginning with the application name, okay? And you might know these naming conventions from other languages, okay? When the folder name represents the import path or the namespacing of the component, okay? Why doing it like this? It prevents duplicate names. So in Angular, if you have two services, so one will run over the other, okay? In your application or in third-party libraries when you import. If you call something a modal window or modal or dollar modal and you import Bootstrap, okay, you will run over Bootstrap's dollar modal, okay, and stuff like that. So this is like a bad thing in the current design of Angular, and in the future it will be easier because we will use ECMAScript 6 modules. ECMAScript 6 is the next version of JavaScript, which is called ECMAScript 5. How surprising, right? Okay. And it shows the file location. So you can guess where you should find it in your file system if you want to refactor it to somewhere else. So for this to work, you must use the array notation when you inject, or the array notation or the $inject, but you should use string names, okay, to import your stuff. If you're just using like the convenient method of just adding the function with the name, like if it's one name, it won't work. You need to use the array dependency for dependency injection. Tip number 8. Follow a style guide, okay? Wait a minute. Okay. Just, yeah. So, style guides. Who is now following a style guide now, currently? any style guide in your own language. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. Awesome. All the rest. And like I also, until like a few months ago, didn't follow a strict style guide. Okay, and a lot of developers that I know don't follow it, and because you don't have time and all the other excuses you have for this and for other like stuff you should do in your development. So style guides. Style guides mainly talks about how much to indent your lines, how to call specific components, or how should you structure. So here you see that instead of using the function, here you see that instead of using a function as the other parameter, I use it outside. So keep this line very small. Okay, so this is another like style guide rule and stuff like that. So why using it? Okay, it keeps the team in sync. So everyone on the team write exactly the same code style. Okay, I know that you have like a crazy psychopath on your team that if you will touch his code, he will murder everyone, right? Every company have this one, so just fire him and make sure everyone is coding in the same style. You should like give up your own if you can't convince the other team members, because that way you can just fix. Like it saves you time, right? You can fix much more faster, like bugs and stuff like that. You can add more feature faster because you can read the code faster, okay? You should see the code and know what is going on, like if you wrote it, okay? And a style guide usually is a document, a single page with like a menu or something like that that you can like follow very easily and give to any new member that joins the team to read it instead of every like, I don't know, like commit or code review explaining another rule, okay, and stuff like that. Coolness. If you're writing Angular, the most popular style guide in Angular is John Papa's style guide, which you have also Todd Moto style guide. You have two options. They're similar, but I like John Papa's better because he explained the motivation behind every rule. He gives you the why or the reasoning behind it. So it makes it much easier to follow and to understand, not just do this and I don't understand why, and stuff like that, okay? So I will share the link to the slide, and you can download. This is a link, although it's yellow. And another cool blog post, if you will Google Eddie Osmani and code style guides, sorry, or beautifier, okay, you will arrive to this amazing blog post, very long, very thorough, that explains the reasoning behind it. And it also talks about code beautifiers. So you have automatic plugins that can watch every time you save your code and make it like and follow the rules you configure before, and just reformat your code automatically to match the style guide. So it saves you a lot of time fixing and stuff like that. So code beautifiers, formatters, and stuff like that, check it out. It's really cool. Awesomeness. Tip number 9. Take a shower at least once a week. It's not technical, it's just, to make friends in the office. Okay. Tip number 10. Okay. I don't know if you see it correctly. Just took out a piece of his arm. Make your reusable component replaceable, okay? So, before we talked about sections, now we're talking about reusable components. So, if you see here, I have a user box that for some reason I want to make a reusable component, okay? So, and this is like the directive definition, and this is like how I will put it in the template. So first of all, make sure you always, when you write reusable component, use isolated scope. If you don't know what it means for all your non-Angular developers here, don't worry about it. If you go into Angular, revisit this slide and read this line, okay? Because it's really important, because then you don't get scope leaking to your directive and you don't change other stuff, and you are not counting on stuff to be on your parent scope and stuff like that. You can have a black box that you can pass around and move from template to template. Make sure you have a clear public API of your directive, so other developers that see your directive, okay, could easily know what parameters, okay, what parameters does it need, and what is the callbacks, or how can I get notifications from it and stuff like that, like you see here. So this is a comment. Imagine that this was one line, okay, because it broke or something like that. But this is like a convention that I'm using to show my intent that this user click function should be passed around with a user parameter. So here you see that when a user clicked, I can pass around a user, okay? And this tells everyone on my team that this is how you use this directive, okay? So have a clear public API. Inject only private services, okay? What I said before about context-aware sections, directive that knows about the services in the application, now you don't do it, okay? You're not doing it because then you tie your directives, like your reusable directive that you might take out and put somewhere like some other application and reuse it and stuff like that. You just tie it now to the application. So, but I do recommend using services, okay, to extend, to better modularize your controllers, your directive controllers. So what do I mean by that? If you have a large controller, the way to make it more readable, more clean code, okay, is to use private services that are inside the same component folder, okay, and not in the common data access layer or stuff like that. That just extending your the controller, so you won't have a controller of 1,000 lines of code. You just will have like we do in classes and subclasses and stuff like that. Not subclasses, but spreading them out. Okay. I wonder if I will do this now or later. Maybe later. Okay. Okay. Sorry for all you Microsoft developers here. Unit test your code. Okay. How many of you unit test your code? Nice. Good for you guys. Let's hear a round of applause. Yeah. Okay, conditioning. So yeah, good for you guys. Usually when I ask this question, I get 20% or 10% of the people unit test their code. How many of you do it TDD style? Test before you write the code? Okay, half. Okay. So yeah, we'll talk about it in a few minutes. Okay, so why doing it? First of all, to become a better engineer, right? You have a lot of good reason to unit test your code, but when unit testing your code, it forces you to write cleaner code to separate your modules and separate your components and stuff like that, so you can mock them out and test them and stuff like that. So you won't have ugly code. It's better for faster bug tracking, so if a test fails, you know where to look. And if you're using unit test, how many unit test your code in JavaScript? This was the original question. Yeah, much more like other talks. Okay, cool. Okay, it's like less common, right? It's becoming more popular now, but until a few years ago, only like a few chosen ones would test their JavaScript code, okay? So now we have more libraries and more tools, okay? That also, we have Karma. It's a test runner that is written by the same guys who wrote Angular, but you can use it not only with Angular, just a test runner. And you have many frameworks. You have Jasmine, and you have Mocha, and you have lots of choices. I personally use Jasmine, okay? And on top of Jasmine, you have this project this is called Jasmine Given, which gives you a nicer, I think, a more cleaner API for your testing. And you can just use given, when, then, because normally you would use describe, it, and stuff like that. And this is your expectation. I expect that user click to be true or something like that, okay? So this gives you like much cleaner, and the other benefit to it, that it saves you a lot of code, because I won't get into it now, research about it, but you can nest stuff, and it knows the right way to run the script. So all of the given statements will run first, and then only the when, and then finally only the then. So you can nest stuff, because usually in our test, the when, like what should I do, what is the action that I'm testing, okay, usually get repeated, and what changes is the conditions and their outcome, right? So when I save the data, if it's wrong data, should get an error. If it's a good data, should get like success, okay? So, but it's the same code. Every time we duplicate the save data, save data, save data, save data, right? And our tests become larger. So this saves you that time. TDD from the start. So this is a tip I usually say, tell to clients that are starting out with JavaScript or with Angular or stuff like that. I usually tell them to first learn the API, how you do testing, okay? And then try to make it like test-driven development, okay, from the start. Write your test first, and then the implementation, okay? Write your test first, see it fails, and then write the implementation and see it passing, okay? In the start, when I started with TDD, it was mind-blowing. It was like, what the hell is going on? Like, what do I even do and stuff like that? But you get used to it fairly quickly, okay? And now it's much more easier for me to write the test, because I already like have the experience. So invest like the 2 weeks and get over like this mind-blowing experience. And if not already, if you don't have already tests in your development cycle, okay, make sure you create an incremental habit. So start with one component. It's hard to convince managers, okay, right, to invest in unit testing once the application has already started, once you started building the application, like a few months have passed by and you don't have any tests. So how can you justify it, right? So a better way to approach it is to pick, like in every sprint, okay, or development cycle that you're working on, pick one service. Start with services. Start with services. They are easier to test, okay? In Angular, they are the most easier component to test. So start with one service, and just make sure you test only this one service, and then add more and more and more and more. Start with one guy who knows how to write tests for one service. Okay, tip number 12. Maintain single responsibility principle in services. Why did I put this duck? Because you should vacuum your sofa and not a duck, okay? You should maintain the single responsibility of the vacuum cleaner. Okay, so what do I mean by single responsibility principle? Okay, basically it says that you should have only one responsibility for every component you are writing, okay? So if you have a user service, its responsibilities are to get user, to save user, and stuff like that, but not to, I don't know, fetch the statistics of some other component, stuff like that. You should maintain a single responsibility principle in all of your components, okay? Why? Each service wants responsibility. It's better for testing. So if you're writing unit tests, when you preserve this rule, you make sure you follow this rule, you will have much cleaner tests. Okay, you can mock out stuff better, and you can separate it to sub-services and stuff like that, and just import one service, and not like when you have like a large service with a lot of responsibilities, usually it means that you need to inject much more services to handle all of its responsibilities. And then you find yourself mocking out like 12, 15 other services when you don't need to if you keep this rule in mind. Better for modularization, okay? You can just, you can just refactor because you have like a single responsibility, so you know that this service only handles statistics, and you can modularize it to another project and stuff like that, and don't have like the question again, okay, what should I do with this hybrid stuff and stuff like that. And it's not only for services, but it's the most common thing, okay? Because they are like the biggest repeating component in Angular. Okay. High five. Okay. I like you. Okay. Yeah. Keep your promises. Okay. So in Angular we have the concept in Angular. In ES6 also, in JavaScript we have the concept of promises. Okay, which means that you have instead of a callback. Okay, because JavaScript you usually asynchronously you work with callbacks and stuff, but you have the concept of an object that represent your like asynchronously code. Okay, so I won't get into the syntax now because you need to research it. Like I said, it's just a taste, but you have like an object, you return a promise, and you can pass that object around to everyone, and you're not tied to a callback, to this like executing everything on this when you called your like saving data function and stuff like that. So prefer promises over callbacks. It makes your code very much cleaner. Okay, and this is like a suggestion when I'm using promises. Okay, I'm using the ing convention or present progressive convention. So reading, so it's implying that it's a continuous process and not like I won't get the result in the same like moment, okay? So it's reading, so other developers can know, oh, I should get a promise, and then I should attach the callback to it, and not like get an array. So ECMAScript 6, which is the next version of JavaScript, like I said, has promises as part of its API, and its style it's different from the Angular initial implementation. So its style is to pass like a constructor, read the resolve and reject function. We won't get into it, but in Angular 1.3, they added this ability. So you could write promises like much more prepared for the next version. Because the goal of Angular is to align itself to the next version of JavaScript and not deviate from it. So our life as developers will get easier. So APIs, like as the browser are advancing, okay, we can drop parts of Angular and just use the native browser JavaScript API. Okay, tip number 14. Any questions? No? None? You get a prize if you ask a question. Okay, it's like the prize is like a sticker for your laptop. Okay, so.
That's my question. Can I have my surprise?
Yeah, you get a sticker now. Come to me after. Yeah, usually I have shirts, but I didn't have time. Just flew from the States. Okay, so tip number 14. Don't stare, it's rude. Okay. Okay, tip number 15. Okay, Sasquatch. What you mean you ain't seen me? Maybe you ain't looking hard enough. Yeah, I have problem seeing. Okay. Sass your bootstrap. Oh, gibberish. Okay. So what is Sass? Sass, Compass, Less, it's all like different libraries for writing higher level CSS, okay? Which is a dreadful word for any server-side and client-side developer, okay? Except few chosen ones who know how to write CSS properly, okay? But we are all scared of CSS. So these libraries makes our CSS development much easier, okay? Much more easier. Why? Because they have like features of nested rules, and you can include other stuff, and you have variables, and you have all this stuff you don't have currently in CSS. So you have Sass and you have Less, which are usually like competing projects, okay? And Compass is a project above Sass. I personally use Sass, okay? And I used to use Compass, but I found that I don't really use a lot of its APIs or its mixins, built-in mixins, and it is tied to Ruby. So you need to install Ruby in order to use Compass. Also, originally you needed to use Ruby to use Sass, but you have a different Sass version that is ported to JavaScript. So you can use if you have Node.js already, you can use Sass to compile your Sass files. So it's much, much, much faster when you compiling your Sass. So that's why I moved to Sass. But if you have other preferences, do your own thing. Wrapping, okay? So I use as I showed you before, I put all of my stuff inside one folder, right? So the way I do it is I keep everything under a context of the same name of my component or section or stuff like that. And that way, I won't leak out, okay, to other CSS rules. If any of you had this problem before when stuff don't look like it should and stuff like that, it's probably because you override some other rule and stuff like that. So this helps you prevent this problem. It's faster and easier web development, and when you do it, and if you're using Bootstrap, so Bootstrap is an open source library for its main goal is to make your projects look nicer and not like the default style that you have in your browser. So you have a lot of reusable styles you can apply to your forms and buttons, and you have model windows, and you have lists and stuff like that. So this is Bootstrap, and originally it's from Twitter, but it then ported to open source, never mind. But when you use it, usually who uses Bootstrap? Here, so you could have saved me the explanation. So if you're using Bootstrap, make sure you don't touch it, okay? So you don't overwrite stuff in it, because it makes it much harder to increase the version and upgrade your version of Bootstrap. With Sass, you can define just the variables outside of Bootstrap and override it from outside. So this is a cool feature of Sass. So check it out. Just import all your variables before Bootstrap, and then you don't need to touch the Bootstrap project. break into small files like I showed you, a small file for each component, and then concatenate everything using like a build tool like a task manager like Grunt or Gulp or whatever. Just concatenate everything to one file, and that way when you use this, the former rule of giving you wrapper, okay? So you can avoid the collisions, but you have smaller parts. Who here? No, that's an embarrassing question. So who in the past, okay, worked with main.css like a huge file, okay? In the past. You don't have to admit it now, okay? Only in the past, okay? So it's a lot of pain, okay? A lot of pain to change stuff, to make sure you don't overwrite other stuff and fix bugs and stuff like that. So this makes it much more easier. Okay. Tip number, we're getting to the end. All the guys who fell asleep, okay? It's okay. You hang on, hang on. Cut it afterwards, okay? What I just said in the edit. Okay, cool. Okay. Manage your packages with Bower, okay? What is Bower? So Bower is a tool. Who uses Bower here? So I will explain. So Bower is a tool that manages your client-side dependencies. So if you need Angular, you can install it by using Bower. It's an open source tool, and I think it's the most popular tool currently for client-side development. We'll talk about other tools in a minute. So why using it, okay? No more manual downloading. I don't know, probably you have like in your IDE like a feature that you can maybe, I don't know if you're like you have NuGet or something like that. Yeah, right? I'm correct? Okay, cool. I'm not a Visual Studio guy. So, so you have this tool already, but this is like a cross, right? Cross operating system, cross tool. That's a command line tool. If you want Angular, you just Bower install, and you can save it. It has a Bower JSON when you configure stuff, and you just state the name of the dependency and the version number, and it just downloads, like NPM if you're using Node and stuff like that. So no more manual downloading. You don't have, for you guys who didn't like move to automatic tool and still downloading manually your files, your dependencies, stop doing it, okay? It's wrong. And it keeps your project source code lighter. Why? Because Bower download everything to a special directory called Bower components. And when you exclude it from your version control system, okay, and don't upload everything to your version control, you don't have everything in your project source, and you can exclude it from searches and stuff like that. So it keeps everything. Because I have seen projects with lots of third-party libraries inside of like directories with our own source code and stuff like that, like mixed together, and it's makes it really, really harder to upgrade versions and to like check stuff. And so yeah, you can be really consistent if you're not using it, but if you're using it, you can just like give it like 3.0 and install it again, and it just upgrades. And it helps you to avoid making local changes. So this is another issue that I've seen, that developers like use jQuery and they have a bug, and just picking a random example, okay, or they use Angular and they have a bug. So they debug it, okay, and they see that Angular has a bug in their, I don't know, in their library. So they just fix it locally, okay, and then commit it. And then you find yourself resolving conflicts or stuff like that with Angular code, and you don't really need to waste your time on doing it because people shouldn't do local changes, okay, locally inside your source code. The proper way, a proper way to do it is to fork the existing third-party library. Like most of them, I think all of them will be on GitHub, to fork it, to make a fix, and then you can just point it in your Bower JSON, okay, to a specific. You don't need it to be in the main repository. You can just give it the GitHub name and the project and a specific hash of a commit, like of a Git commit. And then you can just use it like this. And you can actually send your fix to the Angular team, submitting a pull request, and then help make the world much better, okay? So yeah, so it's emotional for me. You can use Grunt plugin to make your, if you're using this tool, you can add like to your development process if you're using Grunt, like an auto bar install. So when you pull changes, you can, when you run your code, it will install all the dependency that you're missing. Maybe someone upgraded the version, and usually if you don't do a bar install, you will get like a broken application. Okay, NPM. NPM is the Node Package Manager, is the same thing but for Node modules, okay? If any of you know Node.js, okay, which is a server-side JavaScript language. So looking to the future, okay, when we'll use stuff like ES6 modules and stuff like that, I think keeping in mind like projects like NPM and Browserify and stuff like that, I won't get into it now, okay? Because for some of you it will be a bunch of gibberish, okay? But check it out, okay? I think this is a prediction. I think it will replace, okay, using tools like Bower in the future, okay? Because it's it's a much better tool. Okay. Tip 17. Build with Grunt or Gulp. Okay, what is Grunt or Gulp? Yesterday I gave a talk about it. You can watch it later in the videos, but I will do like a summary. So there are basically task runners, okay? So if you're familiar with Ant or other like old school task runners or Maven or stuff like that, it's the same, but it's written in JavaScript. So it's a modular automation tool. You can, why modular? Because it has a lot of plugins that you can just import and transform your source code, okay, and output it to a distribution folder. So you use it for your development cycle and for building your JavaScript. If you don't know why you should build JavaScript, okay, why you should compile it and stuff like that, watch my yesterday talk. So a common task you usually do is concat, minify, revision. Like when you want to deploy to production, you need to concat all the files together and then make them smaller, like minify them, and give them a hash like name for caching issues and stuff like that. So, so these are the common tasks. And use Yeoman's Grunt file or Gulp file as a base for best practices. If you're going to check out these tools, okay, and you want to use them, make sure you learn about the project called Yeoman and install and generate a new project with it and use its Grunt file, or basically the Grunt file and the Gulp file are the config files for these tools. And you install it on your build machine or your CA server that builds your application, your client-side application. And you can drink coffee, because once you have this and you don't do it manually, you have much more time in your life. Okay, awesome. Okay, tip number 18. Auto-generate link text. So this is a follow-up tip for if you're using Grunt, okay? It's magic. Yeah, okay. So, what do I mean by auto-generate link text? So, in your index.html, when you import scripts, you put like a script tag or a link tag for your CSS or JavaScript and stuff like that. And you have a plugin called include source in your Grunt file. For those of you who don't know this Grunt plugin, I just saved you a bunch of time, okay? So you will thank me later. And do hashtag high-res. Thank you for suggesting. Okay, so what does it do? So you can just add a comment to your HTML, which will run through the plugin, and you will generate a new index.html with all the script tags automatically, automagically, okay? So it saves you lots of time and makes your refactoring much, much, much easier. Just make sure you don't include it in Git, okay? So the outcome, like, because it's like always you're adding stuff and stuff like that, it can make your version control life much harder. So exclude it from Git or from, I don't know, Subversion or whatever you're using. Okay, bonus tip number 1. Develop serverless. This is a new tip that I just like added in the last minute because I want you guys to have more like goodies, okay, you can take from this talk. This is a cat that's really happy because he's developing serverless, okay. So fixtures, okay. Fixtures are like mock data that you can develop with to mock your server-side data, usually when you develop a client-side application. So usually when we work in a team, we need to wait for the server guys to create their services so we can use them and test them and get the data and stuff. Or we use like inline, like in the controller or in our component or classes, the like mock data just to test stuff out and stuff like that. But this way, before the prototype, this way, you can just use a module, an Angular module, built-in Angular module called ngmock E2E for end-to-end. And then you will get the $HTTP backend. And you can just define, just mock the REST API, like when calling get, respond with this data, okay? So then it mocks out how the server should look like, okay? And will look like once it will be ready. And you can just develop your components regardless, like there were like a real server, there was like a real server behind it. And then once the server is ready, just remove, okay, this dependency, okay, really quickly. And then you just continue working. You don't have to change all your files with the mock data and stuff like that. I started using it a few months ago, and it really, really, really helped me develop prototypes, okay, to POCs and stuff like that I needed to show like clients, okay, you can do this stuff, but you don't have any server-side ready code. It's like I think like a lot of the time, like it's easier for client-side development to just don't do the work until the server-side is ready, right? Because it's like yeah, let's wait like 2 months until it's ready and stuff like that. But actually, prototyping is, first of all, helps us or help the company decide if we actually need to use this feature, not waste all the time developing. So there is a technique of doing it. I will like do a bunch of videos about it, how you use it in my website. Yeah, we won't get into it now. And so part of the technique is using conditional import. So you import all of the fixtures, okay, this stuff that you add like test. So you add a fixture which represent this fixture like the mock data of this service, okay, because you have single responsibility, okay. See how it all tied together? Okay, great. So bonus tip number 2. prepare for the future. Okay? And what is the future of Angular? Angular 2.0. Okay? So, oh my God, Angular 2.0. So why, why do I mean by that? Anyone, okay, so most of you aren't, like half of you aren't Angular developers, so I will tell you a short story about Angular 2.0. So 6 months ago or so, I think, there was a big conference in France called NG Europe. And in NG Europe, the core team of Angular announced they are going to build Angular 2.0, the next long-awaited version of Angular. But they wanted, as a joke, to show how you, like, every bad decision they make in Angular 1 is gone. So they just show every feature of the current version with a tombstone, okay, saying, okay, we're going to kill the controllers. We're going to kill the services. We're going to, no, they didn't say that, but it was like with a lot of explanation. But the reaction after this conference was like explosion on Twitter, and like I got like I was getting like phones from scared clients, you know, like oh yeah, no, they were joking, you know, it's no, don't go back to GWT, no, yeah. And stuff like that. So everyone like got scared. So I decided to create a video to explain like my clients what has changed from Angular 1.0 to Angular 2.0. So I want to show you this video, okay? Just to help them relax.
I'm sorry to tell you that we killed the controller.
They've killed them all.
Okay, yeah, so this is what I prepared, okay, and yeah, they were like, okay, you're fired. And yeah, so a lot of fear and confusion around this like joke that they tried to make. I was supposed to do a bit on it on my roasting talk in the NGConf, but I didn't have a lot of time. So let's talk about how to prepare for the future. So, oh, sorry. Yeah, my mistake. Okay, don't mind it. It's the, yeah. Okay, so let's just talk on this side, okay, on the future of Angular. So Angular 2.0. So they will change a few like interfaces and stuff like that, but the good news is today we can prepare ourselves, okay, for those changes, okay? It's not that hard. So it's just a matter of preparing our syntax, okay, differently, okay? Like I said before, with the components, just adding a few lines of code, and the transition will be much easier. And the fact is that Angular 2.0 will be much more easier, and will be complying with the ECMAScript 6 API, so it's much better, okay, direction for the future. So we need to make sure that once we will migrate, okay, because we will have to in a few years, I don't know, depending on the scale of the project and the, I don't know, how big is the team, we'll need to prepare ourselves. So another thing we can do is to transpile or compile, okay, to ECMAScript 6 now, ECMAScript 5 now. What do I mean by that is you can write already now ECMAScript 6 code using modules, using classes, using stuff you don't get now in JavaScript, and just run grunt plugin that transpiles all your code into ECMAScript 5, so browser can understand it. Okay, and you can use tools like Tresor or Babel. Okay, recently it was 6.5. They changed the name to Babel.js. Okay, check it out, and you can even try stuff like the APIs from ES7. Okay, and stuff like that. Also, transpiling from TypeScript. So a few weeks ago in ngconf, they announced that they are going to transition to TypeScript. Okay, they first thought about creating a higher level language called AdScript. They changed it to comply with TypeScript. They're working with the Microsoft team together, and Angular 2.0 will be written in TypeScript. So it's a good thing to start thinking about TypeScript and start transpiling or compiling your code, your JavaScript code, from TypeScript to JavaScript already now. Okay, you can just play with it. You don't have to replace all of your code. You can just do it incrementally, okay? And to do it incrementally, you have two methods to do it: inside out, outside in. I won't get into it, don't have a lot of time. So make sure if you do it, you watch the keynote from ngconf of Brad and Igor. They're explaining it much further. But basically, it means that you can either, using the new Angular router, you can start migrating your code, like taking your Angular 1.0, 1.x application, and just add Angular 2.0 code in separate components, okay? So you will have like a hybrid application. Then bit by bit, you will migrate everything to 2.0 when the time comes. And you can start differently and get a Angular 2.0 application and include stuff from 1.0 or 1.x. Okay, this is the gist of it. Okay, if you want to learn more, I have a free course on highres.io. Okay, that help you preparing. I'm warning you, it's the craziest online tutorial you will ever see. Okay, so if you're if you're on medicine or something like that, okay, don't view it. But yeah, I can assure you. And if you like it, write it, tweet it, and stuff like that, share it. Cool, bonus tip number 3. At the office, stay away from this guy. Or this guy. But definitely that guy, right? Okay, cool. Just leave you with the long life tips, okay? Thank you very much. Thank you. This was the session for today, okay? Any questions? Now, you will get a sticker. Yeah.
What's your take about how is your average end-to-end test and unit test? How do you handle them both? Because sometimes you can have a lot of
So end-to-end test is a subject that a lot of companies want to do but don't do it, okay? What my recommendation is to start with sanity tests, like smoke tests, like making sure you have one component in your page and start with that, okay? Focus on your unit test, but start with a sanity test. I even add it to my Git push pre-hook, right? Before I get so I won't push bad code or breaking code. And it's a whole process and stuff like that. But usually I recommend start with that. And from there, only the main user stories of your products, okay, write end-to-end tests for that. But focus your efforts on unit testing, okay? Come to me after it, you will get, and yeah, another question. Hey, how are you?
Thanks for the talk.
Thanks.
Am I correct in assuming that the big uproar with regards to the 2.0 transition was the fact that they said that they were not going to support the previous versions for more than
So let me repeat the question if because I didn't hear the start of your question. Can you repeat like only the first part?
I think the big fuss about the transition to 2.0 with the fact, not that they're breaking stuff or they're moving away from the 1.x characteristics, but the fact that they're not going to support anything for more than 18 months. So
yes. So what?
Right?
Okay. So what the question was for the video is like the big fuss about Angular 2.0 is that they're not going to support like more than 18 months from now the 1.x, and you have large companies like monsters who have like 5 years of development cycle and stuff like that, and they worry that if they invest in Angular now, it won't be supported like 5 years from now. So what they said at ngConf, which is I think a really smart move, is that they're going to support it not like with a limited time, okay? They're going to support it. They have like a dedicated team for it until the statistics, okay, and the community will tell them otherwise. So they are measuring how many people are getting into so they have a new separate website for Angular 2.0, angular.io. They are leaving the JS, okay? They are leaving out the JS, so it will be now only Angular, okay? So if you go to angular.io, you will see the Angular 2.0 like documentation and stuff. And they're measuring how many people are going into the older site and how many people are going to the new site, and sharing the statistics and asking the community, okay, do you think this is, so this is a good point to drop it or something like that. And they said that once it will be lower than a really, really small percentage, like we have with Explorer 6, thank God that we don't use it anymore, but like this part, so they will need to drop it eventually, right? But they are really, after the NG Europe announcement, right, they took a lot of heat about it, so they made sure they will support it, and they made sure that people could relax about it and not worry, because they were joking, like trying to make a point that moving to 2.0 quicker will be better, okay? So yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.